This is Talk to Seattle, and I'm your host, Jason Rigdon. On this episode, we have Tammy Morales, who is running for Seattle City Council in the 2nd District. How are you today?
Hi, I'm very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, maybe your background and experience?
Sure. Let's see. I guess I will start with just sort of the thread of my professional life has always been around economic justice. I'm trained as a planner and have spent many years as a policy advocate. I've worked on mental health insurance, parity, affordable housing, community development. And for several years, I had a consulting firm called Urban Food Link, where I worked on food security and food-related planning issues. Let's see, I grew up with a single mom. She always had two jobs when I was growing up. And often I had two jobs myself, really, until I was, I'd say, in my mid-30s. So I know what it's like to live kind of paycheck to paycheck. And that is why the work that I've always done has been around trying to make sure that other families don't have to struggle the way my family did. Especially now, I'm a mom. I've got three kids. One's on his way to study transportation planning at Portland State. And then I've got two kids one in third grade and one in sixth grade here in the neighborhood. So I see, the kids who are in school with my kids and some of the struggles that our families are having. And I just want to make sure that I'm bringing my experience with working in the communities here and also that policymaking experience to City Hall, so I can try to raise the voices of people who are in the district.
So you also have a long history of community involvement.
I've been working, so right now I work at Rainier Beach Action Coalition, which is a very neighborhood-based group that focuses on equitable development. And just through my work, I've been in Seattle for 20 years, and the work that I've always done is around supporting community economic development, whether that's, as I was saying, in affordable housing. Through my food security work, I've done a lot of work with our small ethnic grocers, trying to help them sell more fresh produce in the neighborhood, for example, while they're also selling their kind of culturally appropriate food to their community. And so through that work, I've developed really good relationships with our array of different ethnic groups and cultural groups in the district. And I'm really proud of the relationships that I have there.
So what made you decide to run for this office?
I'm really running to try to shift the balance of power in the city. I think it's important that working families don't have to struggle. And we've got some great work happening in District 2. There's a lot of community organizations that have some great ideas about how to solve our city's challenges for our communities. But when they try to take those ideas to City Hall, it just feels like nobody's really listening. And I worry that there is undue influence of, kind of corporate special interests and other interests that are being heard, other voices that are being heard instead. I think that our government belongs to the people, and I want to do what I can to build power for the people in this district so that those are the voices that are getting heard instead.
And could you tell me a little bit about your district?
Well, I have to say we have the best food in the city. We have the best artists. We have the most committed neighbors who work, as I was saying, work really hard to make sure that our communities are strong and beautiful and have, important programming that supports our young people and supports our elders. It's a big district. It includes Chinatown International District, Georgetown and Soto, all of Beacon Hill, all of the Rainier Valley, down to Rainier Beach, where I work. And what I love about this district is that the people here do what they have to do to take care of their families, and they speak up for what they believe in. And that is why it is so important to me that the ideas and the solutions that our community comes up with are heard at City Hall, because when somebody's speaking up for what they believe in and has an idea for how to solve a problem, it's important that that gets listened to. And that's what I love about the folks here. We have a really rich tapestry of cultures and languages and lived experience for people to draw from. And I think we need to appreciate that richness and make sure that it gets reflected to City Hall and then back in the way that decisions get made to support the district.
And what are some of the biggest challenges facing your district?
There are lots of citywide issues that I think are felt more acutely in this district because we have so many folks who we have different communities of color, a lot of immigrant and refugee populations, people who speak different languages, many of whom don't speak English or English is their second language. It's easy for these communities to be pushed out, to be marginalized and underrepresented in the way that the city makes decisions. And so I think that we see the impact of that in things like displacement, which I know is a problem throughout the city, or throughout certain parts of the city. Here in District 2, what that means for us is that our neighbors are getting pushed out, our small businesses are getting pushed out, and that really creates a lack of community cohesion. So, we're working really hard to build wealth in the district, and we want to do that by supporting community ownership of assets so that, we stop privatizing wealth. Where I work, Rainier Beach Action Coalition, we're part of a group called South Core. I don't know how familiar folks are with that, but it's communities organizing for racial and regional equity. And that is a coalition of 23 different organizations led by communities of color, representing communities of color. And so we've been pushing for equitable development in the city. We have an initiative and a strategy for stemming displacement. And a lot of that involves preserving cultural anchors, preserving and facilitating community-led economic development. So those are some of the things that I want to make sure we're prioritizing and working on so that we stem displacement. We have, if we're able to develop in the way that we would like to see, it means that we have affordable housing that is affordable to low-income folks, but we also have an array of other services, of more affordable childcare so people can go to work, more groceries so that we're not sort of flooded the way we are down here with fast food and corner stores. If we're supporting our neighborhood development in the right way, it means that people can really stay and thrive in their community, and that's what we're trying to do.
And for the city as a whole, what do you think are the biggest challenges that we're facing right now?
There are a lot of issues. Obviously, homelessness and affordable housing are two huge ones. But I think for me, it sort of comes down to our how we finance public services. I really think that we have to generate revenue in a different way for the city. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the country, but we fund our government like we're, still a small suburban town from the 50s. So we have to keep our libraries open. We have to make sure, our firefighters can answer calls in a timely way. We have to fix our sidewalks and our potholes. And we can't keep asking individual households to pay more sales tax or more property tax every time we need to run the government. So I think that instead we really do need to think about how we're going to ask big corporations to pay their fair share. If we're talking about who can best afford to support some of the things that we need in the city, that's where we have to look. And unfortunately, it doesn't sound like our legislature is going to take responsibility for fixing our upside down tax code. Unfortunately, I think they got really close this time around, but that didn't happen. And so in the meantime, I do think that the city needs to step in and make whatever changes we can at the local level. I also think that we need to acknowledge that how we spend public resources signals what our values are in the city. It's really frustrating to me that the city seems able to dream really big when we're talking about a new waterfront park or a shiny new transfer station. But when we're talking about building new housing or solving our chronic homeless problem or, keeping our neighbors safe with pedestrian improvements and bike improvements, suddenly we shift into this scarcity mentality. And I think we need to acknowledge that and deal with it. Financing public services is hard. There are a lot of needs in the city, especially since we're such a growing city, and there are not unlimited resources. But we have to be bold about how we're going to serve all Seattleites, not just the rich and powerful people in the city. So I believe we need to be bold about solving homelessness, about solving our racial equity issues, solving our transportation issues, and reducing carbon emissions. It's frustrating that we're focused so much on our car-centric culture and not so much about how we help people get through their neighborhoods safely walking and biking. There's a lot that we need to do, that we can do, if we're committed to serving everybody in the city. And so Paul Wellstone was famous for saying, we all do better when we all do better. And that's something that I think we need to remember and sort of keep front and center as we're talking about how this city serves the community.
Homelessness has become the big issue in these races. What can the city do to help homeless folks?
It is a polarizing issue. I understand that people feel frustrated and angry about the way that the city has managed this. And I don't disagree. I think that there, in some ways, it's a problem of focus. I think there is a tendency to conflate homelessness and housing affordability, and they are related, but they are separate problems. And then we turn around and blame homeless people for the situation that they're in. And this is especially problematic when we know that folks who are Black and Native American are disproportionately impacted by all of this. So we can't criminalize homelessness and criminalize poverty when we know that there are already some communities who have disparate impacts from that. But as a human rights commissioner, so I don't know if I said this, I sit on the Seattle Human Rights Commission, and we've been calling for years to end the homeless sweeps because it is not an effective way to use city resources, and it's just inhumane. People deserve a place to lay their head at night, and if the city doesn't have the capacity to move somebody into a real shelter, then sweeping them to the other side of the street doesn't solve anything. So instead, I believe we should be focusing those public resources on chronic homelessness, which is where we spend most of our money. So that means that we have to take a housing first approach. We need to invest in permanent supportive housing so that folks get access to a safe place to be while they're also getting offered whatever it is that has made them chronically homeless in the first place. And I don't know if I need to get this dive this deep, but those who are chronically homeless are a smaller percentage of our general homeless population. But because they are so challenging to work with, we do spend most of our resources on them. And those are the folks who create the frustration because their homelessness is more visible. So, the trash and the crime people complain about, folks who are chronically homeless are by definition have a disability of some sort that makes it so hard to work with them. They have a medical condition that has meant they can't pay a bill or something. They have drug or substance abuse issues. They might have a mental health issue. So there is a reason why it is so hard to work with these folks, and that's what makes it challenging. But that doesn't mean we don't try. It doesn't mean we don't invest what we need to invest to help solve that problem. And I do believe that permanent supportive housing is the way to go for them. And we also need to build more low-income housing, social housing, so that these low-income folks have a place to live once they've stabilized. Because you're not going to go from being chronically homeless to being able to pay $3,000 a month rent. So we need to acknowledge that there is a gap in the housing affordability infrastructure that needs to be filled so that once these folks come out of permanent supportive housing, there is a place that they can afford to be.
A perennial issue in the city has been transportation problems. What can the city do to help improve our transportation system?
As I said earlier, we have to make it safe for people to navigate their neighborhoods and the city, no matter how they get around. So we need to make our neighborhoods safe for cyclists and pedestrians. We need to make it safe for people. If we make our neighborhoods kind of vibrant commercial nodes, then first of all, people don't have to go as far to get to childcare or the grocery store or, jobs. So that's one thing. I also think that we do need to prioritize transit so that we are able to move more people around the city more reliably, hopefully with more frequency. That has been a challenge, so I live in the Rainier Valley where we have the light rail, which is great. And it comes every, 8 or 10 minutes, which is also great. But I live a mile and a half away from the light rail station. So if I want to take the bus only comes every 30 minutes or so. So that doesn't really, address that frequency and reliability challenge that so many people have when they're trying to take the bus. So if we don't build out that infrastructure and those services so that people can take advantage of them, then of course they're not going to take advantage of them. So I think we need to do that so that we can move more people around the city faster. And then I also do think that we have to invest in making our neighborhoods safe for kids who are walking to school. We have a lot of disabled and elderly in the Rainier Valley and in the Chinatown International District. So we need sidewalks to be repaired. We need signal lights that give people enough time to get around, to get across the street. We have to build out our bike network with protected bike lanes for people who get around the neighborhood and get around the city that way. We have to prioritize safety and reliability, because we should not be making project decisions. We shouldn't be voting on safety when we're looking at project decisions.
Another major issue that you touched on a little bit ago was affordability. What can the city do to help improve our housing affordability?
Well, I think there are some, I don't know if they're immediate, but I think there are some things that the city should be doing soon, which is to expedite the permitting process. We've had a homeless emergency for years. We know that we have a housing affordability crisis, and yet our permitting process for actually building affordable housing takes forever, and I don't understand why. If in my mind, if a project has been permitted or is intended to serve low-income people, then that project should get a fast track so that we can get it built. I also think that that we just need to build more housing. We need to build it faster, and we need to make sure that it gets permitted in a way that reflects the priority and the sense of urgency that we have around getting people housed. Another thing we need to be doing is looking at the zoning issue. So we have, a city policy that restricts the kind of housing options that we have in most parts of the city, and that doesn't serve the folks who need housing well. So we need to allow small apartment buildings, duplexes. I have a garage apartment in the back of my house, and it fits in with the character of the neighborhood. So, I think that the things that people love about some of our neighborhoods is the character of them. And I don't think that allowing small duplexes or even small apartment buildings necessarily needs to disrupt that. So we need to be making it easier for these kind of, urban infill housing types to be made available so that we have more options for folks who are looking for lower income alternatives.
We live in very polarized times. How will you as a city leader work to bring people together?
I think I mentioned earlier that I've been a policy advocate for a long time. I've worked already with several of our council members on worker rights, on civil rights, on some development policy around street vacations and community benefits agreements. So I already have working relationships with many of our council members, but I also have experience with bringing folks together who might have different opinions about what needs to happen. I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I used to work for the Texas legislature. So just as an example, I helped get a mental health insurance bill passed several years ago that the House member I worked for had been trying for almost 10 years to pass. And working with the insurance industry and the Alliance for the Mentally Ill and, all of the different folks, the families and parents of children who needed health insurance, mental health insurance, we were able to get that bill passed. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of in my policy work, because it does take a willingness to focus on the outcome that you're looking for, and a willingness to work through the frustration and the sort of rigidness that some people have going into these conversations, to say we might not get everything we want at the end, but we need to take that first step and be willing to come back and finish the job later. That might not be a very popular sentiment, but what I know through my 20-something years of policy work is that it is an iterative process. And while I'm not a proponent of incrementalism, I also know that you don't get anywhere if you're not able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody about where your differences are and how you take the next step to serve the community. So that experience is something that I hope to bring with me and to use so that I can serve the people of District 2 and the people of Seattle.
And if people want to learn more about your campaign, where should they go?
So our website is votefortammy.com. I'm on Twitter at Tammy Morales, SEA. I'm on Instagram, but I'll be honest, I don't know how to use it. And then we do have a Facebook page, Tammy Morales, for District 2.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for your interest and for helping us all get the word out.
This has been Talk to Seattle. I've been your host, Jason Rigdon. If you want to support the show, why don't you follow us on social media? We're at Talk to Seattle on both Instagram and Twitter. Thank you so much for listening.